I'm here. I'm just waiting because YouTube is weird.
All we've got to do now is to start pumping.
Hey, what is going on, everybody? We are live here on YouTube for another great episode of the Fully Inflated Football Podcast. I am your host, Marcus Whitman. Thank you, everybody who is joining me here live, and thank you, everybody, for listening to this thing back if you were not able to make it for the live show. We've got another really fun episode ahead here. We are going to do a little talk about these coaching firings and stuff. A lot of stuff we covered a couple weeks ago, expected firings and stuff. I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of these more surprising firings, if you will, especially in Brian Flores' case. And then I'm going to do kind of my award show. I'm going to do all of the awards, and then we're going to do my All-Pro team along with second team All-Pro, and then we'll get into the mailbag. So for all of you joining me live here, that will be your opportunity at the end of the show to submit your questions to the show if you did not do so on Patreon already, where we will be getting into the Patreon mailbag, which is a great opportunity to let you guys know this show is brought to you by my patrons over on patreon.com/ThatFranchiseGuy. This show, this podcast, literally would not exist without my amazing supporters there. So shout out to all of the patrons, whether you signed up this week for the TFG Draft Insider package or you've been here for the whole ride. Thank you so much. And yes, you can get exclusive draft content now on my Patreon. This is the best time of the year to sign up. So you're not just supporting this channel, you're also going to get tons of draft content. Already did 2 film breakdowns on the top 2 edge players in this class, Kayvon Thibodeau, Aiden Hutchinson. Going to have plenty more to come, along with access to my full draft board, which is going to have player profiles and grades on over 400 players. You'll also get team exclusive 7-round mock drafts in the month leading up to the draft. So lots of great content there. If you want the exclusive access and supporting the show in the process, it is patreon.com/ThatFranchiseGuy. Also, a reminder that this show is sponsored by SeatGeek. Check out their app. If you're buying tickets to sporting events, concerts, you'll get the best prices there, the best user interface, and you'll especially get the best prices by using promo code FranchiseGuy, where you will save $20 on your first purchase and support my channel in the process. All right, let's get into what is going to be a really fun show. We're going to celebrate some big achievements this year and discuss some failures as well as we get into the coaching talk. So let's start with what, in my opinion, was the most surprising and unjustified coach firing since I've been doing this on YouTube easily, and that was the Dolphins firing Brian Flores. This happened on Monday morning. I stayed up till 5 in the morning to get my playoff predictions video done. So I woke up like 2 hours after the news had already broke, and I just woke up and I didn't get enough sleep, but that news just jolted me to life because I was mad at the Dolphins, an organization that I've been mad at for a while. I've been out here on this channel for years saying this team is not doing things the right way. I've been critical of almost all of their drafts and all of their off seasons, other than last year's draft that happened to actually be pretty good. Just, this is an organization that I've been very critical of, and I can't be any more critical of them than this right here. Firing Brian Flores, who in my opinion was the one good thing that this team had going for them. He took over an organization and a roster that was terrible. I don't want to say one of the worst we've ever seen, but if you remember when he first got there, that team stunk. I ranked Alabama ahead of them in the power rankings because they were getting slaughtered by 30-plus points every week. As that season went on, they became much more competitive. You could start to see that the players really wanted to build that they really wanted to play, and they were building something. The next year, they should have been a playoff team. They win 10 games. AFC just didn't shape up their way, but they shatter expectations in year 2. And yet again, heading into this year, I did not think that roster was all that talented. Yet because of Brian Flores' defense and because of the fight that he inspired in that team, they still won 9 games and were in the playoff picture. So to fire Brian Flores, the one good thing that the Dolphins had going for them, in a year that they finally got some good young talent, Javon Holland, Waddle, and Phillips, some young talent for that team, to fire him now, just insane. And then it comes out that a big reason they fired him was because he was feuding with the front office over, guess what, Tua Tagovailoa. And that basically Flores didn't want to go into this offseason with him as the guy. Maybe not necessarily that he wanted to trade Tua all in or needed to replace him immediately, but surely did not view Tua as the future of the organization, at least not yet. And newsflash, that's the right approach. As high as you could possibly be on Tua to say that he is surefire franchise quarterback, with that noodle arm and the amount of turnovers that he has generated, yes, behind a bad offensive line, was dead last in yards per attempt. There's no way. There is no way that you can say Tua is our guy full send unless you were the front office that drafted him ahead of Justin Herbert. And that's the problem here. They fired Brian Flores. They chose Tua over Flores. And that is a critical mistake. So shame on the Miami Dolphins. This was an inexplicable just move by the Miami Dolphins. I cannot believe that was the decision that they made to start their offseason. And I think they're in for a lot of trouble. I really do. Because I look at that team, they have a defense that was crafted by Brian Flores, led by 2 aging corners, and an offense that has no O-line and one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL. So at least you got Jalen Waddle, but this team is headed nowhere fast, in my opinion. As for, and it's not a very attractive spot, by the way, for any head coach, because clearly they're all in on Will Grier for some reason. You're stuck with Tua, and you have a lot of work to do. So not a good move for the Miami Dolphins, to say the least. Flores, on the other hand, immediately becomes, he immediately skyrockets all of these coaching candidates. He's got to be your number one choice. I genuinely may have ranked Brian Flores as a top 10 head coach, like on Sunday, if you asked me before they fired him. I've just been so impressed by the work he's done for Miami. So he's going to end up maybe going to greener pastures. I don't know exactly where he's going to end up. I know Chicago's interviewing him. I do think they would need to find the right offensive mind still to pair with Justin Herbert, but that could be exciting. Minnesota could be a spot for him. The New York Giants could be a spot for him. The Houston Texans, we'll see if they move on from Coley or not. But there's other opportunities out there for Brian Flores, and I think Miami is really just going to regret this immediately, and especially in like 2 years when they go nowhere and have to hit a full rebuild button again. So to hit on a coach like Brian Flores and fire him, inexplicable, in my opinion. Okay, then the New York Giants have fired Joe Judge. Had to happen. What's weird is I'm actually a little bit surprised that they actually did it, because I got so many questions over the last, 2 months of like, give me hope as a New York Giants fan. Where is the hope? Because it felt like they were going to stand by Joe Judge, Daniel Jones, and potentially Dave Gettleman. And now it's like this breath of fresh air for the New York Giants and Giants fans, because at least now they can go in a different direction. I don't know if they're going to be in the right direction, but it'll at least be a different direction, because there's no direction worse than the path they were on with Joe Judge, where they were getting exponentially worse week by week. You have him making a fool out of himself in press conferences, calling out other teams for being clown shows, basically making up that other free agents really wanted to come back when there's only like 3 guys that applied to. Like maybe Dalvin Tomlinson wishes he was back in New York and not living in Minnesota. Maybe. Other than that, I can't imagine who he possibly was talking about with that statement. Talking about the great culture they're building and how they're headed in the right direction. I got a news flash for everybody. If you didn't have eyeballs and you didn't watch the New York Giants, this team was tumbling down a cliff fast. And you know it's bad when you fire Jason Garrett as your offensive coordinator that everybody thinks stinks, and you lose Daniel Jones that everybody thinks stinks at quarterback, and you go from, one of the 10 worst offenses in the NFL to one of the 3 worst offenses in the 21st century, maybe the worst passing game in the 21st century. A lot of times when a team's starting quarterback goes down, it reveals what the coaching staff is capable of. It doesn't always mean you win. It doesn't always mean your team improves. It certainly doesn't mean that. But you can at least see more definitively what a coaching staff and what a culture can do to elevate everything else outside of the quarterback position. Hell, the team in Washington that Joe Judge was making fun of is the prime example of that. They have been a turnstile at quarterback, and they figure things out. They find systems that work. They fight. There was none of that for the Giants. In fact, they hid offensively. For all of this hoorah talk, badass mentality that Joe Judge preaches, they played the most cowardly offensive style I think I've ever seen. You want to know their play script? Run, bubble screen pass, draw, run, bubble screen pass, slant, RPO, run, draw. There was no, they didn't even try offensively. And everyone's throwing Jake Fromm under the bus, not trying to defend Jake Fromm, but you can't even evaluate a quarterback when literally all they're doing is handing off draws and throwing bubble screens. That is what their offense was. So you had to make that firing. There was no hope. There was no positive direction. The only clown show was in New York. It was just the obvious move to make. So good for the New York Giants for pulling the trigger, because it really felt like about a month ago they were not going to make this move. And then you were heading into basically another year with Joe Judge, maybe another year with Gettleman, I don't know, and a regime tied to Daniel Jones in a potential contract season. And that might be the most I'm trying to find the right word, because I'm not a huge Daniel Jones hater at this point relative to the way most people talk about it, but it might be the biggest saving grace is that your organization is no longer tied to Daniel Jones. So whoever comes in is probably going to view him as the starter. I think rightfully so. And honestly, seeing what that team looked like after he went down, I think people are viewing him in a more positive light, because at least the offense was functional with Daniel Jones. But I think that lost my train of thought there. I think you have removed Daniel Jones being tied to that front office. So whoever comes in doesn't have to make any decisions on Daniel Jones because they are the one that invested in him. So if they decide to move on from Daniel Jones and things don't work out moving forward with him, it's not this new regime having to admit their failures. They just inherited the guy. So I think it's a relatively attractive spot, especially for an offensive mind. I look at Byron Leftwich. There's so many offensive minds. Josh McDaniels. We did the whole show 2 weeks ago. Any kind of offensive guru, this is a good spot for you, because you have honestly an embarrassment of riches at playmaker. 4 deep at wide receiver, a tight end, and Evan Ingram, Saquon Barkley. You have a quarterback that's currently cheap and you're not committed to. You have 2 first-round picks at the top of the first round, and a defense that I honestly think would be really smart to just, when you take the job, say, I want to maintain Patrick Graham and let him just do exactly what he's been doing with that defense, because you have no complaints with what's going on that side of the ball. It's an opportunity to come in with a simplistic objective, fix the offensive line with 2 first-round picks at your disposal, and figure out the quarterback situation within the next 2 years. That's your goal. I think it's an attractive spot, not to mention it's the New York Giants. There's a lot of prestige that goes with that. So I do think it's an attractive job opening. And it's going to be very interesting to see who they hire. It really is. Because they could, while I'm optimistic, they could screw it up, right? The Giants are the type of organization that, they would hire Doug Peterson and say, he won a Super Bowl for our division rivals. Like, he's got to be good, and let Patrick Graham walk, and give Daniel Jones a contract extension. Like, they still have to take the right steps, but this was altering your path, literally changing paths to at least give you a way out into brighter horizons, if that makes sense. So good on the Giants for making the right call. Moving on. And then the other one is the Minnesota Vikings firing Mike Zimmer. Now, I'm not going to spend as much time here because on the podcast 2 weeks ago where I did the coaching carousel, I discussed this. I talked about the right landing spots for a head coach for them and all that stuff. But I do want to say that it's done now. I wasn't sure if the Vikings were going to do this because, let's be honest, Mike Zimmer is a good NFL head coach, and defensively, he's one of the most brilliant minds in the league. Now, things had run stale for Minnesota, and I think as a head coach, his old school mentality had run its course. The run the ball, play defense type of coaching, it's outdated and is getting phased out of the NFL, and Mike Zimmer is just the next in line for that to happen to. He's also got a big ego, and I think some of the relationships there had started to sour, so it was just time to move on from Mike Zimmer. I don't think he gets a head coaching job. I wouldn't be that surprised if he did. There's like 7 openings right now, so if a team like Houston, again, Culley hasn't been fired yet, they're making their decision there. It sounds like they might keep him, but there's spots. Miami, I think there's spots. Jacksonville, there's spots where they might look at Mike Zimmer and his resume and say, you're the best option we've got. So I wouldn't be stunned, but for someone to get him as a defensive coordinator, I talked about it on the Strong Opinion Sports show a few weeks ago, for those of you that caught that. Think about like the San Francisco 49ers, someone with a genius offensive mind. The fact that you could pick up Mike Zimmer as your defensive coordinator, it's just a complete and utter luxury for somebody if that does happen. So he should at least get a defensive coordinator job the second it becomes clear that he's not going to get a head coaching job. And then for the Vikings, it becomes fascinating. They also, by the way, moved on from Rick Spielman, their general manager. And I don't think Rick Spielman's a bad GM, but I think what this tells me is that they're ready for a full rebuild. And that gets really interesting because Kirk Cousins is there. And do you trade Kirk Cousins, start Kellen Mond for a year, see what you've got there, and if you really suck, you're in the Bryce Young sweepstakes? I really don't think that's a worst-case scenario. And if that's your mentality, do we see Adam Thielen on the trade block? Do we see Daniil Hunter on the trade block? Do we see any of these veterans here? I said Adam Thielen, Harrison Smith, Eric Kendricks. There is a world where the Vikings just go full blow up like Madden rebuild on this thing, which I don't think is the worst case scenario. I think this Vikings team has stayed afloat as an average squad for so long. Living here in Minnesota, I get the sense that Vikings fans are willing to hit rock bottom for a year if it means, finding a quarterback of the future and having that, championship mentality of knowing that you need to hit rock bottom a lot of times to go where you want to go. It takes a lot of, swallowing your pride and foresight to make that move. It's why we almost never see it in the NFL. And that's another situation where I'm really curious to see what the Vikings do, because I actually think if you get a second rounder for Kirk, you get, maybe a first rounder for, I don't know if I would trade Daniil Hunter. I would be very hesitant to do that. But the injuries are stacking up there. You get a second rounder for Kendricks. You get maybe a second or a third for Thielen. Like, you load up on mid-round picks and you go full rebuild on it. It could be the right move for the Minnesota Vikings. And that's really all the coach talk I have there. And the chat's saying trade Justin Jefferson. No way. That is the one thing, is you have a 23-year-old, to tease my next segment a little bit, all-pro wide receiver. That is something you do not trade. That is something you hold on to, because if you get Bryce Young in a year, I think Justin Jefferson will be willing to sit this thing out for a year. Just give him some money early on or something, and I think he'll be just fine with that. So that's a good transition into my next segment here. We are going to do all of the awards: MVP, Offensive Defensive Player of the Year, Rookies of the Year, Comeback Player of the Year, Coach of the Year. We're going to do all that. And then I'm going to do my all-pro team position by position. And we're doing first team and second team. So buckle up and let's get started. MVP, I'm going to go with the unanimous choice here, Aaron Rodgers, the 1 seed in the NFC, number 1 in EPA, working with a depleted offensive line. What is he? Second in the NFL in big time throw percentage, third in turnover worthy play percentage, just 4 interceptions on the season. Really just handling his business, being the best quarterback in the NFL, working with a team. Yes, you have Davante Adams, but you look at the lost opportunities by players like Alan Lazard and Josiah DeGuara, Randall Cobb and MVS missing half the season. He is the MVP of this season. You look at the Packers without Aaron Rodgers, just forget a second about what they looked like with Jordan Love. Just think of that team with an average quarterback. It's not even close to this version of the Packers. And then we actually saw it in action, Jordan Love playing for the Chiefs. I think that actually helped Aaron Rodgers' MVP case because you lose those back shoulders to Davante Adams. You lose the ability to navigate pressure and always know where to go with the football. You lose that ability to perfectly drop in a hole shot against cover 2 when your right guard gets annihilated right away. That's what Rodgers has brought to the table. It's elite processing, elite accuracy, decision-making, pocket presence, arm talent, you name it. He is the best quarterback in the NFL on the best team. It really shouldn't be a huge debate. Aaron Rodgers is the MVP. Yes, Tom Brady leads the league in passing yards. Yes, Tom Brady had an unbelievable season, especially for a 44-year-old quarterback. But just because he threw the ball more than Aaron Rodgers, to me, does not make him the most valuable player in the NFL. It does make his stats look aesthetically more appealing. But if Aaron Rodgers, with his yards per attempt, threw the ball as much as Tom Brady, he would have significantly better stats. Rodgers didn't have to throw the ball as much because they got into a lot of fourth quarters where they were up 2 scores and the offense just shut down. So Rodgers is the MVP, currently, I think, minus 375 favorite to win it. And then we have the Offensive Player of the Year, also a pretty easy decision for me, Jonathan Taylor. I think we should stop considering quarterbacks for the Offensive Player of the Year and consider this award as the non-quarterback MVP. And for me, it's Jonathan Taylor. I wish I would have pulled the numbers, but I did see it last week. If you look at the what is it? Not EPA, wins above replacement. I think it's wins above replacement is the PFF stat. But anyway, Jonathan Taylor compared to all other running backs is just astronomical. Like, he actually was contributing substantial amounts of wins to the Colts, which is usually not the case for a running back position. But you look at his breakaway percentage, his ability to create those big runs, his vision to find holes that most running backs wouldn't, his ability to fight for those tough yardage and pick up first downs, keep the defense fresh, keep the offense on the field, not to mention leading the league in rushing, an impact in the receiving game. To me, JT was the reason the Colts should have made the playoffs. Carson Wentz screwed him at the end, but Jonathan Taylor is my Offensive Player of the Year. And let's go to Defensive Player of the Year. Now, I caught some criticism on Twitter because I said that TJ Watt is not the best defensive player in the NFL this year, and I will stand by that. But he is my pick for Defensive Player of the Year because a lot of the cases here is you do need to look at stats. And he broke the sack record. Now, he didn't have as many pressures as about 12 other edge rushers. He missed some time. But breaking that sack record, getting the Steelers into the playoffs with the defense that they had, I think also sealed this thing for me. If the Steelers didn't make the playoffs, maybe I would go with Aaron Donald. But the Steelers aren't in the playoffs without TJ Watt. The Rams are probably in the playoffs without Aaron Donald. Though I do think Aaron Donald is still the best defensive player in the year, and I wouldn't blame anybody for voting for him. But that last game, breaking the sack record and getting the Steelers into the playoffs, that for me pushes it over the edge. So I will pick TJ Watt for Defensive Player of the Year, which is very much a statistical award. I do not think he's the best defensive player in the league. I think Myles Garrett, when healthy, was better. I think Aaron Donald is still better. And then you can get into TJ Watt in the same conversation with like Nick Bosa and a few other edge rushers as well. Offensive Rookie of the Year, really don't even need to spend any time on this. It's Jamar Chase. I will shout out Mac Jones for having a great rookie season for the Patriots, but Jamar Chase was like, what was he, 5th or 6th in yardage? You could just tell the difference in offensive explosiveness with him in there compared to last year. Like, T. Higgins and Boyd are great, but they didn't have that vertical threat or that guy that could just catch a slant and take it to the house like he has done. So Jamar Chase, Offensive Rookie of the Year, really no debate there. Defensive Rookie of the Year, definitely no debate. No one even close to what Micah Parsons did. Parsons actually relatively close to TJ Watt, in my opinion, for like being as good of a defensive player. Parsons is insane. The different ways that they use him, you know, there's all this debate about should he be an edge full-time? Should he be a linebacker full-time? He should be this. He should be exactly this, because I think that especially in a system where you're willing to blitz him as much as they do, it throws off offensive lines so much, because you really can't double team a blitzing linebacker. It just kind of throws off the rules of pass protection. You can do it, but it's going to cause some problems elsewhere. So there's that. There's, you know, when you run up the line of scrimmage, you got to figure out where he is and where he's coming from. And then, you know what? If it's 3rd and long and you just want to put him on the edge, you can still do that. You don't need to use him there. The fact that he could show like he's blitzing, draw a double team, and then drop into coverage and run with a slot receiver up the seam from the A gap, and then all of a sudden the offensive line is all thrown off. Like, schematically speaking, the way they use Micah Parsons alone it's so fun to think about. It really is. So I would keep him doing exactly what he's doing, because it is disruptive as hell. I would say more valuable than just lining up Lawrence on the edge every snap. It does help that they have Randy Gregory and Lawrence, who are also damn good edge rushers. Like, if those guys go down, you can just say, all right, Parsons, we need you to be a little more of an edge this week. And that's totally fine. But that's a different conversation. He had the best pressure rate in the NFL of any defensive player. He contributed in coverage. His just sideline to sideline speed to contain outside runs, like, watch him this week. That's what the Niners really feed off of, right? Is Debo getting the corner, Kittle on a jet sweep, all this speed to the edge that the Niners have. I bet we see a lot of Micah Parsons as an actual linebacker, because his sideline to sideline speed is going to be so valuable to defend a system like that. So that was a lot of time on a consensus award, but Micah Parsons, it was almost like throwing him in the mix for the Defensive Player of the Year with that whole rant, because I really think he's in that conversation. Now, I think if you're not going Watt, I still think you got to go Donald, just because of the sack record, I think, is what sets Watt over. But potatoes, tomatoes. Coach of the Year, this also changed in Week 18 for me, and that is Mike Vrabel winning Coach of the Year. I think the Titans getting the 1 seed pushed him just ever so slightly ahead of Matt LaFleur for Coach of the Year, because Matt LaFleur has done a phenomenal job. I'd understand if you want to vote for him, but he does have Aaron Rodgers. Mike Vrabel works with a quarterback that I think is fine. Ryan Tannehill is a good quarterback, but as we saw, he loses a couple linemen, he loses his receivers. You're not going to have a quarterback that's just elevating everything. And then you look at kind of his decision, really, to work with the front office, blow up their entire defense, and overnight, in one offseason, completely reshaped this unit. They tore up the D-line, they tore up the secondary, they made bold moves, things like cutting Adoree Jackson, and it worked, man. It really worked. They found the right people, and their defense, which Mike Vrabel oversees, has been phenomenal this season and is the primary reason they have the 1 seed. Then you throw in the fact that this team embraces his mentality, that underdog, former linebacker, like he just has that chip on his shoulder mentality, and it permeates through the entire team. And that's when you do still see them. They had an effective run game in a lot of games without Derrick Henry. They did get receivers like Nick Westbrook-Akina to step up. I do think Mike Vrabel getting the 1 seed in the AFC is a slightly more impressive accomplishment than what Matt LaFleur did, even though, LaFleur had a ton of adversity himself. And I think either of those guys are well-deserving, but I am going to give it to Mike Vrabel. And then we have comeback player of the year. My pick is Joe Burrow. And people are going to say, oh, but look at the gruesome Dak Prescott injury. Well, if you ask any doctor, they'll actually tell you that an ACL injury is harder to recover from than a broken ankle, even though the broken ankle looks more gruesome. So the actual recovery was more difficult for Joe Burrow. And Joe Burrow was the better player. So while we were all kind of giving Dak Prescott the Comeback Player of the Year award before the season even started, because we knew, like, great O-line, great receivers, Dak's really good, national spotlight when he got injured, his ankle snapped in half, it seemed so obvious. But for Joe Burrow to really kind of finish, I felt like at the end of last year, he was building a lot of momentum. He was building the Bengals that are not a good team, especially last year, building them into a playoff contender. He goes down and the team fell apart. So the idea of him coming back is very much relevant for me because he was balling out last year as a rookie, had the Bengals in the playoff picture, and goes down. So yes, it is a comeback, even though he wasn't as established as a Dak Prescott. So Burrow, to me, a harder recovery and has outplayed Dak Prescott. So there really shouldn't be a strong case for Dak, in my opinion. To me, it's Joe Burrow. Okay. And that is our award show. Now we're going to do my all-pro team. Now, we did get a super chat from Tanner, so thank you, Tanner. Not a question, but we are getting closer to the mailbag portion here. But this will be fun. And remember, these are all elite players that we are debating. So to leave someone off, it's not that I hate him or think he's not deserving or anything like that. I'm looking at this from a neutral perspective, all 32 teams. I can only pick so many players. So if I leave your boy off, I'm sorry, not hating on him. It's just I think someone else was probably a little bit better. So all-pro team. We kind of already did this with quarterback with the MVP discussion, but Aaron Rodgers is first and Tom Brady is second for me. Again, I think my MVP discussion focused on that a little bit. I will give Brady a little bit more cadence here. Yes, he's got an elite offensive line, and yes, he has a phenomenal group of playmakers. He really has only gone the last couple weeks with this diminished version of this Bucs offense. For the entire season, he's had Chris Godwin, he's had Mike Evans, he's had Gronk for the a good half of the season. He's had Antonio Brown for half the season that when on the field was an elite, like top 5 to 10 receiver, better than Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. So he's got that. He's got a great O-line, but Tom Brady makes the most of that group. And I think what's really not stated enough is that how much Tom Brady protects his offensive line by being incredibly decisive, knowing just you can't throw a coverage at him that he hasn't seen. You might occasionally confuse him just as you can confuse anybody, but he knows exactly where he's got to go with the football. And he's going to navigate that pocket perfectly. The ball's out, and he does it while still being like, 8th in yards per attempt or something. Or, he's still pushing the ball downfield despite getting rid of the ball so quick. Yeah, he's going to check the ball down a lot, but that's smart. It's the right thing to do in a lot of plays. So while I don't know how much he truly elevates his receiving core, I think there's spots where he does, especially with like an Antonio Brown who's got that kind of ideal chemistry over the middle of the field where just he's in sync with Tom Brady. Whereas Mike Evans and Godwin, I don't think are so much those players. It's more of just you're running the same route that I expect you to, and I'm going to put the ball in position where maybe Brady's not always elevating those guys. But I do think the O-line really benefits from playing with Tom Brady. They know exactly where he's going to be. The ball's out. And really, if you look across the board, like those O-linemen all grade out great, and they're really good players, but they're really good players protected by Tom Brady's style. So that is where I want to give Brady a lot of credit. And I think, it's the perfect pairing of elite surrounding cast and an elite quarterback still playing at the top of his game at 44 years old. So Tom Brady, to me, is going to get second team All-Pro. I think like Herbert and Burrow need to just be mentioned. I don't need to break them down, but both those guys had phenomenal seasons and need to be mentioned. Okay, running back, Jonathan Taylor, first team, should be unanimous. And then second, I went back and forth between Nick Chubb and Joe Mixon, a couple AFC North guys. And I ended up going with Joe Mixon just because he adds a little bit more in the receiving game. Nick Chubb missed some time. So if you take total yardage, Joe Mixon edges him out just so slightly. Tough call. I think Joe Mixon has been a bigger identity for his offense than Nick Chubb was for his on a better offense. So, tough call, but I am going to go with Joe Mixon, who had a phenomenal season for the Cincinnati Bengals. And now wide receiver, the top two are easy. Devontae Adams and Cooper Kupp, both just really legendary seasons. I mean, Cooper Kupp did he break I don't think he's, chat, you guys let me know. Did Cooper Kupp break the regular season receiving yardage record or not? I should have looked that up, but I know he was like closing in on it. I know it but the thing with Cooper Kupp is he is just their offense runs through him. The run after catch ability, the catch in traffic ability, his release off the line of scrimmage is super underrated. His ability as a run blocker, he's a better run blocker than a lot of tight ends out there. So he is their entire identity on their offense. You'll also see him chat saying no, he did not break the single season, but he was very close. So thank you, chat. But they'll use them. You guys probably all know how a typical naked boot works. Play action, which the Rams run that Shanahan style offense. You're going play action and hoping that the defensive end collapses down on the running back on an inside or an outside zone. And then you're going to boot the quarterback out the opposite direction. And so many teams nowadays have coached their edge players up to just don't crash down. You're probably not going to make that play anyway. Get ready for the naked boot, because that's really what's going to hurt us. So it's been harder and harder over the last few years for teams to run that. But what the Rams started doing is, and a big tell that it's coming, is that the tight end is going to be there. And a lot of times they'll have the tight end block that edge guy, but it's not as effective. What the Rams have done is actually have Cooper Kupp come in from the slot and chip that guy or just straight up block him so that Stafford can get out on the boot. And it's incredibly effective. And we started to see even Urban Meyer pick that up, and it's really picked up. And I don't know if the Rams stole that from somewhere else or if they innovated that, but Cooper Kupp is the perfect receiver because he's playing in the slot anyway, and he's incredibly physical. So that's just a little wrinkle that I've picked up on him, is him down blocking on play action boots, and then he'll release late where the defense is already scrambling trying to cover these things. So it's just a perfect little wrinkle in their offense. And he's so good at it. So obviously Cooper Kupp, first team All-Pro. Devontae Adams also speaks for himself. It's a season that has, I think, very likely secured him as a Hall of Famer. He just needs to kind of exist at this level or within this level for a few more years. Aaron Rodgers said he's the best player he's ever played with, which is a huge ringing endorsement. It's a combination of his ability to get open, which is obviously the most valuable trait for any receiver. It's his run after catch ability, his route running finesse, release off the line of scrimmage that are all just elite. paired with the mental side of the game where he's just on the same page with Rodgers. Like, you can tell he's put in so much time in the film room to know when he's getting the back shoulder, when he needs to look for the ball. Just all of it. You guys know how good Davante Adams is. I don't need to go down that path. But the third receiver for first team All-Pro was a little bit more difficult. I chose Justin Jefferson just ahead of Jamar Chase, who's on my second team. Jefferson, you do need to kind of consider yardage in this discussion because awards and All-Pro, at the end of the day, like when you're looking at who had the better production, stats is going to come into play. It's not so much saying like who I'd rather have moving forward. It's just ranking their season within itself. So Justin Jefferson did have more yards. He did have more receptions. He did it with Kirk Cousins instead of Joe Burrow. To me, Justin Jefferson is as good as Jamar Chase in contested catch situations, but actually better release, better, honestly, just raw speed as a route runner. Like, he might not have as fast of a 40 time necessarily, but he does separate a little bit better than Jamar Chase. He's got more wiggle in his routes. So he's incredibly valuable for the Vikings. He was their entire offense this season. So Justin Jefferson, to me, first team All-Pro. Then second team, got Jamar Chase, Offensive Rookie of the Year, and second team All-Pro. Lit a spark for that Bengals offense. And what else can you say about Jamar Chase that hasn't already been said? Run after catch, contested catch ability, run blocking. The dude is headed for greatness. And the fact that he gets to grow up in his young career with Joe Burrow, it's going to be electric and so fun. Then I have Deebo Samuel. Needs to be on the All-Pro team somewhere. Not all for his ability as a receiver, but what gets overlooked is he is a damn good receiver. Just as a receiver, he's not an All-Pro type of player, though he did have like 1,400 receiving yards. A lot of that's after the catch, but that's why Deebo needs to be on this list. If it's not as a running back flex, then it is as a wide receiver. His ability with the ball in his hand is unparalleled in this league, and that counts Cooper Kupp, that counts Tyreek Hill, Jamar Chase. He is the run-after-catch king at this point in time, and that is why the Niners and Kyle Shanahan, just another notch in his genius resume, or resume as a genius, just says, we'll just stick him at running back. Give him an extra 5 or 6 touches a game. Why not? And I don't even know how many rushing yards he had. I imagine it had to be over 500 because he was like one of the best running backs in the NFL when used just straight up as a running back out of the backfield. But that's not to discredit the fact that he's actually a really good receiver. He is a tough guy to press because he's so strong and explosive. He just kind of overwhelms you off the line. He has a little bit of route running prowess, like especially over the middle of the field on those in-breakers. Very good in that department. His hands had some drop issues early on, but definitely didn't hold him back from a great season. So for me, Deebo Samuel is the definition of an All-Pro caliber player. It is as a second teamer, but you can't write the story of the 49ers playoff offense without Deebo Samuel, and that's also a big part of it. So the third guy here is Tyreek Hill. A bit of a down season for his expectations. I think you can start to have some worries about drops with Tyreek Hill. He has 23 drops over the last 2 years, but he still is, Davante Adams has been so good that I don't know if you can say this anymore, but the second most valuable receiver in the NFL, just because his speed and ability to separate, it's unparalleled. It's such a weapon, and it draws so much attention, and he's still ultra productive on top of it. So Tyreek Hill is my second team, my last second team All-Pro guy. And then Tanner did just drop a super chat. So again, save those super chats till the end, but this does apply. Are you ready to say that Devontae is better than Jordy, Jennings, and Randall? Yes, easily. I'm not afraid to say that. All right, let's keep it moving. Tight end, I've got Mark Andrews as my first team All-Pro tight end. just more productive than any tight end this year. Similar to like Debo, like you can't envision the Ravens offense without Mark Andrews. Was just such a reliable red zone target, third down target, all of it. Mark Andrews was the best tight end in the NFL this season, improved his run blocking as well. So a well-earned first-team All-Pro season for Mark Andrews. And then my second-team tight end is actually not Travis Kelce, it's George Kittle. And that might be one of the least popular picks here because Travis Kelce's still at 1,000 yards, still a great season, and surely worthy of second-team All-Pro. But George Kittle is so valuable to that Niners offense. And I pulled some numbers here. The Niners with George Kittle scored 27 points per game on average. In the 3 games without him, they scored 16. And this is a tight end award, not a receiver award. Kelce's blocking reduced this season, whereas George Kittle only cemented his flag as the best blocking tight end in the NFL. So not only is he ultra valuable as a receiver, he made some game-changing plays. I can't remember the games exactly, but a couple come to my mind of just unreal catches. One-handed, outstretched arms. He made his stamp as a receiver. His run after catch is also incredible. But the fact that he also blocks better than, I don't know, half of the tackles in the league in the run game opens up everything for that team. So I don't think it's a coincidence that the Niners scored over 10 points a game more with George Kittle on the field than without. You do that with Kelce, it's not going to be as dramatic on the Chiefs. So for me, George Kittle is the second team All-Pro tight end this year. Now we got offensive line. So left tackle, first team is Trent Williams. Very easy. We're getting a lot of Niners love. The top talent on the Niners is elite. Now, there shouldn't be any debate there. He was the highest rated player per PFF this season at any position. The most dominant run blocking season you're probably ever going to see from a tackle, and he's well above average as a pass protector, so shouldn't be any debate there with Trent Williams. And then second team, I struggled with this one between 2 AFC West left tackles, and I came really close to picking Colton Miller, who I think was really valuable to that Raiders offense. That you look at the O-line outside of Colton Miller, it's not great, and he had a great year in pass protection. But I got to give it to Rashawn Slater, who stepped in as a rookie and saved that left tackle position. That was everything the Chargers needed in the draft. And to get a obviously all-pro caliber left tackle to come out and play like that as a rookie, it's insane. We've seen it twice now in the last 2 years with Tristan Wirfs and now Rashawn Slater. Like, don't take that for granted. Getting an all-pro caliber left tackle as a rookie, I don't know if we'll go another 10 years without seeing it. I don't think this is a trend. I think it's just a random blip in the radar, but he's so good, man. And one thing that I see my Chargers fans on Twitter that I follow, one thing they point out is that guys keep trying to bull rush this dude, and they keep losing because he's 6'3". He's got like right at the threshold arms. I think his arms are like right at 33 inches. They keep trying to bull rush him because you look at his stature and he looks like an offensive center. And he's just so good with his balance and his technique that he just doesn't get overwhelmed by power. And then he has everything you could ever ask for as a finesse blocker. So Rashawn Slater is my second team All-Pro left tackle, with a shout out to Colton Miller of the Raiders. Left guard, this was pretty easy. Joel Bitonio and Ali Marpet for the Bucks. Just two established, tenured, athletic, all-pro caliber linemen that had, to me, the clear-cut best 2 seasons for any left guard. So not going to overthink it there at left guard. Center, I had some thinking to do. Not with my, by the way, Bitonio was first team and Marpet was second team. Center, I had some thinking to do with my second team guy, but my first team guy is Corey Linsley. I felt like Corey Linsley was the best center in the NFL. Green Bay let him walk, and the Chargers picked him up. And he had a little bit of a slow start, but by the end of the year, you're watching these broadcasts and it's Chris Collinsworth and all these announcers like drawing up the highlights of like, look how good Corey Linsley is, whether it's in pass pro or run blocking. And it's true. Like he's the most well-rounded center. He's in his prime at like 30 years old. The dude is the first team All-Pro center. I can't think of anybody better than him right now. And then the second team, I went with Jason Kelce because I think what he brings to the table as a run blocker opened up so much flexibility for that Eagles offense that really needed to lean into the run. And literally flexibility. His ability to pull, get on the move, delete guys down the field. It's unparalleled to anything I've seen since I've been doing this. So I think he added a little bit more to the table than Creed Humphrey did, though Creed Humphrey, as a rookie, played at an all-pro level, and a lot of teams screwed up letting him fall to the second round. The Niners taking the right guard out of Notre Dame, Aaron Banks. The Seahawks drafting really the NFC West dropped the ball on this one, to be honest, and the Green Bay Packers, because the Seahawks took Dwayne Eskridge, who barely made an impact for them. The Rams took Tutu Atwell over him, which was mind-numbing. The Packers took a different center in Josh Myers, critical mistake there, and a lot of other teams really should have probably taken Creed Humphrey in the first round. So huge mistake by the rest of the NFL. The Chiefs maximize and get close to an all-pro center. But I did choose Jason Kelce over Creed Humphrey for the actual team. Okay, right guard was pretty easy for me. For first team, Zach Martin, Dallas Cowboys. Best offensive guard in the NFL, doing it again. The offensive production for the Cowboys offense is undeniable. And Zach Martin's a huge part of it. I mean, he's the best guard in football. And he played like it again. So he's the first team all-pro. And then Wyatt Teller is my second team guy. You know, the Browns offense was hard to watch this year, but those two guards were not. You still saw probably, I'm sure they had over 2,000 yards of rushing, right? Because Chubb had like 1,100, Hunt had like 500 or 600, and D'Ernest Johnson had some big games too. So like their rushing game was still dominant, and you got to look at that O-line and thank them for a large part of that. And Wyatt Teller is maybe the biggest weapon on the move in the league. Like, he will bury you as a puller, like absolutely take you out of the play. So he's incredibly valuable to the Browns, and was a big part of why that offense was even remotely functional this year. And then right tackle, almost threw at the O-lineman. Sorry, folks that aren't O-lineman fans, and you're welcome, I guess, to those that are. But right tackle, first team All-Pro, Tristan Wirfs, really by far the best right tackle in the NFL right now, both run blocking and pass protection. There's really no glitches in his game, honestly. He's smart, he's fast, he's built, he's got power. He might be he's not better than Trent Williams, but he's probably not a better pass protector than David Bakhtiari, but he's just insane, man. He is the perfect offensive lineman. I said coming out of the draft that this guy is the Saquon Barkley of tackle prospects as an athlete, and he's taken that and refined his game. This guy's in his second year, and this is the second time I've given him an all-pro vote. So Tristan Wirfs is unreal, man. And then second team right tackle was probably the hardest spot to pick out of anyone on this list. I ended up going to Lane Johnson. You know, I think he's been the second best right tackle. Obviously, the Eagles' run game is the reason they're in the playoffs. And that's really what it comes down to. I don't think he's having a typical all-pro season, but it's got to be a right tackle, and I think he's been the second best this year. He's missed a few games. So that's where we're going to settle for our second right tackle. All right, quick sip of water before we do the defense here. Hope you guys are having fun. All right, defense, interior defensive line. Aaron Donald, first off, still the best player in football. Again, the gap between his amount of pressures and anybody else at his position even though he's double teamed more than any player in the league, it is just a statistical blip on the radar, what he does. I still think he's the best defensive player ever. I said that last summer, and I still think that. I think there's a little bit of voter fatigue with Defensive Player of the Year. I think people love themselves some sack numbers. But if you want my honest opinion, Aaron Donald is the best defensive player in the NFL still. He had like a slow start and then came on strong in the second half of the year. And it's like, okay, Aaron Donald at 30 years old is still that dude. So that one was easy. And then Cameron Hayward was my pick for second team All-Pro. Now, he tapered off a little bit as the year went on, but he still, to me, was the most well-rounded defensive tackle for the All-Pro team. Because from a pass rushing perspective, his full season's body of work, he still was a better pass rusher than my next two guys, though his production was more in the first half of the season, Cam Hayward's was. But Cam Hayward is he the best run defending defensive lineman in the league? I mean, Vita Vea, certainly, in that conversation. But other than that, I can't think of anybody else I'm taking over Cam Hayward. So to be that good as a run defender, I think I'm not. This is going to turn to like a TJ Watt hate show, but Cam Hayward draws a ton of attention on that D line that opens things up for a guy like TJ Watt. So he's my other first team All-Pro interior guy, and then second team I have Jonathan Allen for the Washington football team, who was like the one guy on that D line that held up his end of the bargain this year. Obviously, Sweat and Chase Young ended up getting hurt, but Jonathan Allen just kept going. He's in the top, again, I should have pulled these numbers, but I think he's third or fourth for interior guys for pressures. But just a game-changing pass rusher on the inside. And what's unique about Jonathan Allen is he has such a finessey skill set. Aaron Donald obviously does, so I can't say he has the best skill set of any pass rushing interior guy in the league. But behind Aaron Donald, I think you'd go Jonathan Allen. Like, he'll bull rush you one play, he'll spin around you the next play. He's got cross chops, he's got rip moves, he's got swim moves. He can beat you in any way, and he knows when to go to those different moves, and he's incredibly productive. So he held up his end of the bargain. The other guys in that D-line that was supposed to be so incredible this year either got hurt or weren't as good. So Jonathan Allen, second team All-Pro. And then I got to go give it to Chris Jones, who may have been first team if he played all season on the interior, but he didn't. The experiment of having him lose weight and play on the edge was a failure. There's no way around it. They played him out of position, they got cute, and it hurt their defense for a large part of the time because straight up he was not a good edge player. He was fine, but he was not Chris Jones on the edge. So they mid-season put him back inside. I don't know if he was able to gain that weight back or not, but was still back inside a top 3 pass rushing interior guy once they put him back in there. Wrecking games, the power, the explosiveness off the ball, it's game wrecking. And they've got that guy back now for the playoffs. Their defense went from bottom 3 back to like average almost overnight when they put Chris Jones back full-time inside. So that is the definition of an all-pro caliber player. So second team there for Chris Jones. Okay, over to the edge group now. Let's see. We've got first team, maybe going to surprise some people on this one. Although for those that did see my film breakdown on him, maybe not. Max Crosby, first team All-Pro, edge player. Again, you have to consider the production within a given season for this award. Max Crosby, the only edge player with over 100 pressures, his pass rush win rate, or at least his pressure percentage up there, over 15%. He was the reason they were able to beat the Chargers. And get into the playoffs. He took over games Now, moving forward, am I taking him over a guy like Joey Bosa, who's not going to make the list here, or a handful of other really dominant edge players? Probably not. But for his 2021 season, Max Crosby, to me, next to TJ Watt, who's my other first team edge player, was the most impactful edge rusher in the league. And you look at the Raiders' defense really becoming a solid unit. That pass rush was damn good this year. It was funny that I mocked Yannick Ngakoue. I straight up mocked him when Yannick Ngakoue said, me and Max Crosby are the best edge duo in the NFL. I mocked him. I list like 15 other units that I thought were better. And my God, I was wrong, because that was the best edge duo in the league this year. It was. They wrecked games. Now, you could say he had a run of like facing backup caliber tackles, and maybe that's a reason he doesn't repeat this season in the future, which was an unbelievable season. But within the context of this season, Max Crosby, first team All-Pro on the edge. So a tip of the cap to Max Crosby, who's quickly become one of my favorite players in the league. And it's funny because, like I said in that film breakdown on him, in his rookie year, I thought he was overrated because everyone was comparing him to like Nick Bosa. When he didn't have half the amount of pressures, he just got a bunch of sacks off those pressures. Now it's like the opposite. He doesn't have nearly as many sacks as you would think he would have based on the amount of pressures he has. You would think he has about 20 sacks based on how often he's pressured the quarterback. But yeah, TJ Watt's my other guy. Now, you can't just say, oh, TJ Watt was 13th in pressures, so he doesn't deserve this stuff. Like, he had way less pass rush snaps than basically anybody else in consideration here. I think he was at like 400 pass rush snaps. Max Crosby, for example, is up to like 650, I think. Let me just pull that real quick so I'm not whiffing on these numbers. So, like, what I'm saying is TJ Watt's efficiency was still damn good, and clearly his efficiency converting sacks was even better. I think he converted like 40% of his sacks, 40% of his pressures into sacks. So yeah, pass rush snaps, Crosby had 597, which actually led the NFL. Garrett was at 543, Nick Bosa at 525. And then you got to go all the way down to 35th. TJ Watt was 35th in pass rush snaps. So it's not as simple as saying, oh, he only had 62 pressures. He didn't have as many opportunities. So I don't want to belabor that point. TJ Watt is very much deserving of first team All-Pro. So TJ Watt and Max Crosby are my first team All-Pro edge players. Second team, I had to have Myles Garrett on there. I think you could flip Crosby and Garrett. Garrett was the defensive player of the year up until like week 13. He suffered a minor injury and was not as efficient after that. I think it knocked him out of defensive player of the year, definitely. And with how Max Crosby finished the year, got the Raiders into the playoffs, I think it knocked Myles Garrett actually all the way down to second team All-Pro. When healthy, I think he's the best edge player in the league. I do. That's the last couple years, I think, has been made very clear. So still a phenomenal season. It sucks that he slowed down, and it was probably because of injuries. But I still think very well deserving of second team All-Pro. And then I struggled with my fourth guy here. I was between Nick Bosa, who was a comeback player of the year candidate, by the way, and someone I tweeted about before the show that at least needs to be mentioned, Rashawn Gary. I picked Nick Bosa. I did, because we keep referencing how sack production and just the stats, like, you need to kind of think about that stuff, even if I weight it less than other people might. Bosa did finish better than Rashawn Gary did this year. Bosa had like 15 sacks. I think Bosa is a better, more impactful player than Rashawn Gary, but Rashawn Gary was right there from a production standpoint. So people are laughing. because people have been underrating Rashawn Gary since he came out in the draft. I even made a video about it before he was a Green Bay Packer. I said people need to stop sleeping on Rashawn Gary. I thought he was unfairly criticized for a lack of production in college when he was top 10 in pressures his sophomore year, got hurt his junior year, was double-teamed every single play, and still had a decent season, was voted first-team Big Ten. Gets to the Packers and is a rotational guy because they got the Smith bros ahead of him. I never understood why so many people were low on Rashawn Gary, although I kind of do because people are obsessed with these speed rushers. They don't understand with quarterbacks getting rid of the ball quicker than ever and play action becoming as important as it is, power is more important than being a speed rusher. And Rashawn Gary knows the quickest way to the quarterback is through the guy, and that's what he does. So I need to shout out Rashawn Gary, who's second in the NFL in pressures among edge players. He's fourth in the NFL in PFF grade, and he's first in the NFL in pressure rate. Literally, on a per-snap basis, pressured the quarterback at a higher rate than anybody in the NFL. So I do think Rashawn Gary needs to be mentioned. I left him off just to avoid being accused of being a biased Rashawn Gary truther, because I've been on this path for 3 years, since before he came out in the draft, when some people were saying he belonged in the second round. I said that is crazy. I think I had him as my second edge player in that class, behind Nick Bosa, but ahead of Brian Burns and ahead of Josh Allen. So, yeah, Rashawn Gary deserves a shout-out. But I will give it to Nick Bosa, who had, I think, 15 sacks, really turned back into that game wrecker, especially in the second half of the season. His ability to beat you in so many different ways is unique. At his age, to be as polished as a pass rusher as he is, he is also incredibly deserving. So I'm going to go with Bosa slightly over Rashawn Gary, who would have been my fifth guy. All right, linebacker. I actually have to pick 3 at each spot here, according to the way that people vote on this, which to me is too many based on how few good linebackers there are in the NFL. I'd rather give a spot to another interior guy and another edge guy as opposed to or like a flex pass rusher type than a third linebacker. But anyway, my first team guys are Micah Parsons, who we spent plenty of time talking about as Defensive Rookie of the Year. Now, I guess that's a workaround way to get a flex pass rusher, because that's literally what Micah Parsons is. But still played the majority of his snaps as a linebacker, even if it's close. He's used in so many different ways, but Micah Parsons, I'm going to put him on the team as a linebacker because it opened the door to put more deserving players in, but Micah Parsons is absolutely a first-team all-pro defender, whichever place you want to put him. Then I have Darius Leonard. I kind of wrote my Darius Leonard apology for him, although I'm not going to apologize for saying in years past he's been overrated. But I now view him as an all-pro top NFL linebacker. And he does it in different ways than I've typically said. I've always said the elite linebacker is Fred Warner, it's Levante David, Kendricks, Bobby Wagner, guys that truly impact the game in coverage and force offensive coordinators to adjust the way they attack the middle of the field, because they have guys there that are such matchup problems against tight ends and slot receivers. And that's still not Darius Leonard, but he has shown to me to impact the game in so many other ways that I think it compensates. Because I didn't think his ability to force as many fumbles as he has was sustainable, because history usually tells you it's not. But when you see the way he does it, and he's done it over multiple seasons now, he has the peanut punch perfected. Like, his ability to kind of calculate, and I'll use that meme of like any science fiction, not meme, reference I made several weeks ago, where, any science fiction movie where you've got the robot AI that can like pause time and calculate its moves before it makes them, and then time resumes and it plays all those things out. That's Darius Leonard seeing the ball come to him. He has the maniac mentality to be like, okay, the ball's going to end up right there. He's talked about how he's practiced boxing to make this thing perfect, and it's totally real. This guy's going to force 5 or 6 fumbles a year at least. So that adds value in ways that other linebackers don't have. And he's improved his coverage this year. He's been baiting quarterbacks. He clearly has put the time in to understand route concepts even better. So, yes, I've said Leonard was overrated in the past. I thought based on his play to that point, it was hard to justify the contract he got. But the Colts were right. This guy is an animal, and he is a turnover machine for the right reasons, not in a fluky way. So I have shifted a little bit on Darius Leonard, to say the least, and he's in my first team All-Pro. And then I've got Demario Davis, because the Saints defense was legit a top 5 defense at least. At least. The Saints defense, who shut out Tom Brady and the Bucs, came oh so close to making the playoffs with no offense. You can't have that defense without all the things Demario Davis does for them. Run defense, this guy is a traditional, old school 200. You can't even say traditional now, because now a traditional linebacker is 230 pounds. But he's 250, so he'll thump willingly. He can stack and shed in all the good old ways, but he somehow is able to cover better than the majority of starting linebackers in the league, the wide majority. He's probably the 5th or 6th best cover linebacker in the league. He is lethal as a blitzer with all of the man coverage they run. They deploy him in the right ways, as a blitzer, as a spy guy, as a hook zone defender, in man coverage himself. You can do anything with him. So he is, I guess, the other first team All-Pro guy. Now, I would knock him down if I was only voting for 2 of these guys. And then my next guy was Devondre Campbell for the Green Bay Packers, basically for the same things I just said about Demario Davis. From a grading perspective, was the highest graded linebacker in the NFL this year. Not named Micah Parsons, who's kind of that hybrid piece, right? But Devondre Campbell gave the Packers something they haven't had, I don't know, since Ray Nitschke. Seriously, a real linebacker with sideline-to-sideline speed, who can blitz, who can tackle in space, who can cover. But it's not just that the Packers have missed that. He was generally a star player, a difference maker for what will hopefully prove to be a championship caliber defense. And I just think he's well deserving. And I think to say, oh, but they picked him off the street, or oh, but he's never been this player before. It's like the same thing as Max Crosby. Do I expect Devondre Campbell to ever repeat this season? No. But this has been an all-pro season. Not to mention he's literally one of the best tacklers in the NFL. This dude, and I probably just jinxed him into a terrible playoff performance now, but he has 6'4" frame. He's athletic. He has always actually been a really good tackler, but he's put the rest of his game together. So I'm not going to shy away from putting Campbell in there, even if I don't think he'll sustain as that good of a player. I think for this season he deserves it. And then, the next guys, like I said, I think there's too many linebackers that I need to pick here, because those would be my 4. I went with Fred Warner, who finished the season really strong for a Niners defense that really came full circle at the end of the year. Picked it up as a cover guy, a guy that can shed blocks, is a leader for that defense. I don't feel great about it. And then I went with Levante David, who I was interchanging with Roquan Smith, who just misses the cut here. Levante David's still a phenomenal player. Missed a few games this year, but when he's out there, you can tell the difference in their defense. So, again, Fred Warner and Levante David, I don't feel great about. I don't think either of them had all-pro caliber seasons, but because of the way they list this, those would be my 5th and 6th guys, with Roquan Smith close. All right. We have defensive backs, and then we're done. You take a little sip of water here. Glug, 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 glug. Cornerbacks. This will be fun. So My first team all-pro cornerbacks are Jalen Ramsey and A.J. Terrell. Those were easy. They were the two best corners in the NFL this year, especially in A.J. Terrell's case. No one thinks about this guy because the Falcons' defense effing sucks, right? They have no talent there. It's him and Grady Jarrett, and I'm not even sure Deion Jones is good anymore. But A.J. Terrell was first in percentage of targets, target percentage. So, or whatever they call the stat. But the stat that shows you what percent of their targets did they allow a reception? A.J. Terrell was at 43%. The next guy down was at 48%. That guy had half the amount of targets as A.J. Terrell. And then the next guy down after that was at 53%, which is 10% less than A.J. Terrell. He is first in yards allowed. If you look at players that received 50 targets or more, he was first in yards allowed by a substantial margin. And he's surrounded by hot garbage. No pass rush, no corners around him. A.J. Terrell was maybe the best cornerback in the NFL. So he, to me, is undisputably first-team All-Pro. And then I went with J.C. Jackson. And the reason I'm kind of using this tone is because the Cowboys fans are coming out saying Trayvon Diggs had 11 picks. How is he not first-team All-Pro? Trayvon Diggs allowed more yards in coverage than any corner in the NFL this year. Now, there's a trade-off there. He's a very aggressive guy. He's going to trade a lot of those yardage for interceptions. I don't think the majority of his interceptions are fluky. Now, the opportunity to get targeted and interceptions is often fluky, but there's actually plays where you can see Trayvon Diggs is intentionally losing a half a step or delaying his zone assignment because he knows the ball's coming his way and he will jump on things and create those opportunities. He makes the quarterback thinks there's a lane there and he breaks on it. You don't get 11 interceptions without some of that. And that's why Trayvon Diggs is on my second team. But here's the thing. J.C. Jackson also has that, but he does it without allowing the most yardage of any corner in the NFL. I think his trade-off, I will take 8 interceptions and actually really high-end coverage skills on top of it. So when you're taking those risks, you're not putting yourself in a situation that's susceptible to those big plays that Trayvon Diggs has surrendered. But he's also got 8 interceptions on the season with great ball skills. So my top 3 are Jalen Ramsey, A.J. Terrell, and J.C. Jackson. Trayvon Diggs does make it on the second team because I do think there's something to be said about his ball hawking ability to bait quarterbacks. But straight up as a cover guy, he's not on the same level as those 3 first-team All-Pro guys and a lot of other players. But I will give him credit as a second-team All-Pro guy. And then Darius Slay and Marshawn Lattimore, who to me were the best 2 remaining cover corners from this season. Veteran guys, elite athletes, the number 1 corners on their team. Both guys had great seasons, and I actually settled on those guys relatively easily. Okay, now we have safety, and we'll be on to the mailbag. So my first team safety was really easy. Kevin Byard has been the best safety in the NFL. The dude's versatile. He's always had range as a free safety, but he's really evolved over time as a guy that can come up and play man coverage, really good in quarters if they do run that in Tennessee, which isn't very often. Good run defender. He's got size. He's at 210 pounds. Fast guy, smart player. Had a really big down year last year, and it's really difficult to have a productive season as a safety when your defense is as bad as the Titans' defense was last year. No pass rush. The corners around him stank. It's just hard to find those opportunities. So the second the pass rush improves and the corners around him improved, guess what? Kevin Byard's back as the best safety in the NFL. So he was pretty easy. He was honestly someone I just briefly thought about as Defensive Player of the Year because he's been that good for a really good defense that got them the 1 seed in the AFC. I wouldn't pick him, but it was really easy for him to be my first team All-Pro. And then I went with Derwin. Derwin's a fan favorite. Everyone's going to rush to put him on the first team, all-pro team, and think of, every reason to give it to him. But he is deserving. And talk about a defense that doesn't have a lot around him and a defense that asked a ton out of Derwin James. That's very much applicable here. I mean, seriously, they have Joey Bosa and nothing else on that defense. Seriously. It was one of the worst defenses in the NFL. And the only reason they had good games was because Bosa and Derwin James took over. Didn't give up a lot of big plays. Was uber consistent as a tackler, as a blitzer, can come up field. A leader of the defense. Derwin is my other first-team All-Pro guy. And then second team, I have Antoine Winfield for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Micah Hyde for the Buffalo Bills. One player that I give a ton of credit for, or credit to, in Antoine Winfield, and another player that I feel like Bills fans think I don't give enough credit to, and that's Micah Hyde. So Winfield, I think, is underappreciated on a global scale. I think the Tampa Bay defense in general doesn't always get enough credit. But he's a guy that he allows them to do so many different things. He can go free safety and show elite ball skills, just like his dad. Antoine Winfield, going back to Minnesota, even at 5'9", his ability to high point a football and bring in interceptions, it's rare for a free safety. So he has that ball hawking free safety style. But he can come down in the box. He'll defend the run. He's 200 pounds at 5'9". Like, all of the credit that people give Tyrann Mathieu, I think Antoine Winfield in year 2 is a better player than Tyrann Mathieu ever was. And that's saying a lot. But he takes risks like Mathieu does, but he doesn't give up the yardage that Mathieu does. He's better downfield. He's a better tackler. And I think as a man defender, you could probably say Matthew's a little bit better, but it's close. Ultra versatile, do-it-all safety that is having an unreal second season. Am I attached to my pre-draft take on Antoine Winfield, where I had him as a top 15 player in that class, a surefire first rounder? Maybe, but that's all playing out in the NFL. Grading, pass breakups, interceptions, highlight plays, whatever you want to look at, Antoine Winfield is one of the 4 best safeties in the NFL right now. Micah Hyde, on the other hand, does it in a little bit different ways because he's just so effing smart. Former cornerback, plays in a very quarters-heavy system that totally says communicate well on the back end, pass off your coverages, don't get beat over the top, and we're going to force opposing offenses to make mistakes. And Micah Hyde, paired with Jordan Poyer, who I thought about going with Hyde and Poyer, but I just think Winfield's been that good. Poyer would have probably been my 5th pick here, who's Micah Hyde's teammate. They're like almost interchangeable. I just think Hyde's a little bit better and has been doing it for a little bit longer. But he's got range as a former corner. He's fast. He's not like elite speed, but he's certainly fast for a safety. And again, ultra high football IQ with ball skills, physical enough to come down and tackle. But to have him paired with Jordan Poyer communicating that defense, that's why they've been able to lose Tre'Davious White. And I've talked in the past, actually, about how quarters-heavy, split safety defenses actually, the more valuable spot is to have smart, fast, versatile safeties like the Bills have. Whereas if you have that, you can actually survive with average corners on the outside. And I think Green Bay has been evidence of that this year. And I think the Buffalo Bills has been evidence of that this year. Both teams lost their number 1 corner and have survived because those teams both run those quarter systems and have excellent athletic, versatile safeties. So Micah Hyde, a huge part of that. And there are my all-pro teams. All right, let's get into the mailbag. Again, if you want to be able to submit questions for this show, you can do it right now via Super Chat here on the live chat or via Patreon. That is patreon.com/ThatFranchiseGuy. Sneak into the DMs, lead with mailbag questions so that I know you are looking to ask a mailbag question, and we will answer your question on the show. So our first question here is from Brandon. No, I'm not doing special teams, Alyssa. I'm usually grabbing a beer or making some more popcorn during special teams. You can go to someone else for special teams opinions, but Justin Tucker would be first team kicker for sure. I don't know about punter. So, actually, Brandon did not have a question. I was just getting back to him. So disregard that. Tanner just came in with another super chat. Thank you, Tanner. Really appreciate the support here on the show. Why did the Chargers defense struggle with Staley as a defensive guy at head coach? I'm not going to lie. I was a little bit disappointed in Brandon Staley's rookie season. A little bit. Not like overwhelmingly disappointed, but I would have liked to see them establish more role players as the season gone on. And I do think a lot of it is a lack of talent. Like Alohi Gilman at strong safety shouldn't be getting those opportunities. The players they're playing on the D-line opposite of Joey Bosa are doo-doo. They just are. The corners that they have on that roster are not talented players other than Asante Samuel, who actually got worse as the season went on. They need to improve. If you look at that Chargers roster, it's like if red is really bad and let's say green is like elite, D-line, red, green. It's weird because they were in a hybrid front, so it's not so easy. But edge rush, okay, let's restart that. Let's say it's a 3-4 front. D-line is like red, yellow, red. DJ Jones is the yellow. Edge, yellow, green. Their edge is fine. And then linebacker, it's Keyz White had a good year, but Kenneth Murray is a player that I thought should have done better in year 2 with Brandon Staley as a defensive mind. He didn't. He was a red this year, along with whoever else they wanted to play there. And then in the secondary, honestly, Asante Samuel was a yellow and kind of got worse as the year went on. Michael Davis is a yellow. And then you've got red everywhere else and a complete lack of depth. You got Derwin. Nasir Adderley is like fine. He had an okay year, but probably was no better than I thought he would be. They don't have the depth. They don't have the talent. But I would have liked to see Brandon Staley get more out of an Uchenna Nwosu, get more out of a Jerry Tillery, get more out of a Kenneth Walker, more out of a Nasir Adderley, more out of a Asante Samuel. And we didn't really see that. So I'm worried about Brandon Staley. I'm not in panic mode, but it was a really bad defense. I think part of it is talent, and part of it is I'm not fully convinced Brandon Staley's the right guy. A little bit of both. Stack Bundles has a super chat. Thank you for the support, Stack Bundles. Still hate your take not having Creed first team All-Pro. All love, TFG. I get it, man. Creed's a freaking monster, so you're not going to get any huge disagreement from me. I just think Corey Linsley, better all-around player. More transformative for that offensive line as well. Okay, mailbag question on Patreon from Funny Face Bro. Let's say Watson does get traded to the Dolphins, which sounds like it's not going to happen, by the way. But we'll answer your question anyway. If the Texans don't want him and want to stick with Davis Mills, do you think a team like the Browns should trade for Tua? No, not the Browns. I'd rather just roll it back with Baker and hope that, 2021 can be explained away by his bad shoulder. The only team that I would be trading for Tua would be as a transitional quarterback. Like if I don't even know the right spot. Like Pittsburgh, maybe Tua makes sense. Like we need a placeholder. I'm treating Tua like Jimmy Garoppolo. That's who he is as a quarterback until proven otherwise. But after year 2, that is how I'm viewing Tua. I would rather get Jimmy. I think he's a better quarterback than Tua right now. If I can't get Jimmy, I'm treating Tua. I'm never mind the fact that it's year 2 or whatever. He doesn't have a strong arm and he makes mistakes. Strong arm's never getting better. If he stops making mistakes, maybe he can get better. But yeah, maybe Denver. Noah just said in the chat. But seriously, Tua is in the same bucket for me right now is Andy Dalton, Dalton might be a little bit below, but like Jimmy Garoppolo, Jameis Winston, Tua, like he is a bridge quarterback until proven otherwise. But for the Browns, Tua's not going to be an upgrade to Baker Mayfield. They make the same mistakes, and Baker has a stronger arm. So that to me wouldn't be a good fit. Okay, from Griffin, what's your thought on Jim Harbaugh going to the Raiders? I love that fit. I think the Raiders have a great assistant coaching staff in place with Greg Olson, who's a good offensive coordinator, and Gus Bradley, who's doing a great job with that defense. Harbaugh can come in and be the CEO type. I think Rich Versace, is that his name? I think he's done a really good job. I think you interview him, but I think that makes about as much sense as anybody is Jim Harbaugh to the Raiders. And I think that's the kind of team that could attract Jim Harbaugh to leave Michigan too. I think the Bears also probably going to have a good chance at Harbaugh, who's a Bears guy. Tanner, super chat question, Quentin Nelson or Trent Williams? I mean, you got to go Trent Williams, right? Quentin Nelson's really fun, but he's not a better run blocker than Trent. He doesn't play a more valuable position than Trent. And frankly, he's not a better pass blocker than Trent. So that one's pretty easy. I don't think you're, other than age, I don't think you're taking anybody over Trent Williams right now. Okay, from David, mailbag question on Patreon. Oh, it's pronounced David. Thank you for correcting me. Sorry, I was mispronouncing your name before, but mailbag question from David. Couple of long ones here. Number one, what do you think of the way the Rams depth played when missing starters on the O-line? How do you think that's reflected on their team building process? They got good backups, like Bobby Evans, off the top of my head. There's another guy in there. Who was it? Let's pull that right now. I've always felt like the Rams have a good body of guys. Don't they have the guy they got from the Browns too that stepped in? Austin Corbett. He's been starting. Who am I thinking of? Yeah, mainly Bobby Evans. Really, they've leaned on. Oh, and Noteboom. Yeah, I like Evans and Noteboom. I think they're really like good athletic fits. I think they just have good depth at that position. They've drafted well in the mid rounds, really like they have everywhere. Like the reason they're so confident trading first round picks is they trust their front office to find second round talent in the fourth round. And I think Noteboom and Evans are good examples of that. Yeah, I think both guys are good players. And then who do you think the most appropriate fits as Joker players on both sides of the ball on each NFL team? Who do you think are the most appropriate fits as Joker? I'm not sure I understand that question, David, so I think I'm going to skip it for time's sake here, but thank you for the questions, and thank you for the kind message where he says, Happy New Year and keep up the incredible content. That is the plan for a big year of great content. Next mailbag question is from Frosty. Quick thoughts on Amon-Ra. Excellent find. Like, perfect slot receiver. He's crafty, accelerates well, good with the ball in his hands, good run blocker. I'm not, like, overly surprised that he's been effective there. Like, they don't have this explosive vertical offense. They've been coming from behind a lot, which I think like opens up a lot of underneath stuff. Obviously, when you're trailing by 3 scores in the second half, like teams are going to give you that underneath stuff. So some of it's that, but I think they've found a solid option. Whether he's a number 2 or a number 3, you could sit here and debate that all day. We'll find out in time. But they've found a starting caliber receiver on day 3 of the draft, which is not easy to do. So it was a great pick, and I think he'll be a building block for that offense. He's not a number 1. He just isn't going to separate on the outside like a number 1. He just doesn't have the speed to do that, but really good find. I get why Lions fans are excited about him. From James, Super Chat. In the interest of winning Super Bowls, do the Bucs try and keep Godwin or roll the dice with Tyler Johnson? Well, the Bucs are going to have to find a way to keep Chris Godwin. I think they're going to really try and do it, but they've got, I think, two pieces on the O-line are up. Left tackle and center, Ryan Jensen, is up. They also need to be conscious of that secondary. Carlton Davis is up this year. You've got Jamel Dean, who's fantastic, is up next year, along with Sean Murphy-Bunting. You're going to have to pay Antoine Winfield. Their safeties are good. I don't know if they're going to be able to swing it. They obviously are going to want to. They love him. But I just don't know if they're going to be able to swing it. We've seen crazier things happen. I wouldn't be surprised if they find a way to make it work, but it's going to be really tough. Kappa, thanks, John, in the chat. Kappa is also unrestricted, so it's going to be really tough. We also got a super chat question from Lil Caesar Vivo. The 5 first-round rookie quarterbacks last season were disappointing, to say the least. How do I see their future outlook? I'm not worried about Trevor yet. They gotta hire the right coach. Too much talent for him to be written off as a bust already. Played well in the season finale. I'm not worried about him. I still think he can project as a top 10 quarterback someday. Still like the Justin Herbert comparisons for him. Zach Wilson, I think, got more comfortable. I still feel pretty good about him. Some rough moments for a rookie, but it's not easy on the Jets, and played really well down the stretch. So I still think he's got, top 10, top 15 potential. Trey Lance has shown some development within each of his games. Still has a ways to go. Some questionable decision-making. Mechanics getting better, though, which I like to see in that second game. I said Trey Lance had the best chance to be a Hall of Famer out of the 5. I think I would stand by that, just because Shanahan is proving yet again that he's a genius. So I still feel good about those 3, who are my top 3. Mac Jones, I think it almost feels like we know what he is. He's just going to continue to make less mistakes as his career goes on. He's going to be in that 10 to 15 range, I feel like, for the majority of his career, which I guess is higher than we view him right now, but he's just very steady. Feel pretty good about what he's going to do. And then that leaves Justin Fields, who I think has the biggest range of outcomes. I mean, Fields could be a top 5 quarterback someday, or he could be a bust. His decision-making is really a worry. Holds on to the ball way too long. Highest rate of turnover-worthy plays out of any quarterback in the league. But he's got the arm talent, he's got the accuracy, he's got the kind of swagger and energy and character you look for in a franchise quarterback. So the Bears got to do a good job to help him develop, which they didn't really do so far. So I guess that's my breakdown there. All right, from Chase. Okay, that's not a mailbag question. I will get back to that later. REA Beats. What are the best trades you've seen in the past 10 years? D-Hop for a second, not included. I'm just going to try and think of one. Wyatt Teller from the Bills. Browns getting Wyatt Teller for like a 6th round pick. Number 1 right there off the top of my head. There's probably others, but that was insane what they did there. Dude just made my all-pro team. From Honk Boy, considering the downward spiral of Miami Dolphins and Tua's inability to truly unlock the deep ball, should Jalen Waddle consider requesting a trade? I am not a fan of young players requesting a trade, so I'm going to say no. But for Jalen Waddle's sake, if you're just asking from a career perspective, yeah, but he won't, and I don't think he should. So I'm going to say no. From Devontae Rivera, which state has better football teams, Florida or New York? That's really funny because both states have a championship contender, Tampa and Buffalo, and both teams have laughingstock organizations. Jags and that's a really fun question. Jags and Dolphins and Jets and Giants. I think I'll go with Florida, because I think the Bucs are a little better than the Bills. The Dolphins have been better than the Giants, I suppose. Jags aren't better than the Jets, but it sure as hell isn't a big gap. Great question, though. I will go Florida in a smidge. Tanner, another Super Chat question. Thank you, Tanner. Who should win front office of the year? Cincinnati Bengals. Excellent job. Draft Jamar Chase in the first round. Two moves that people questioned that worked strongly in their favor. Letting Carl Lawson go and signing Trey Hendrickson, which was an upgrade straight up, let alone the fact that Lawson got hurt, which was an injury concern for him. And then letting Williams go, or not Williams. I can't think of his name. Having a brain fart here. Boy, this is bothering me. Who was it? Went to Washington. But anyway, they let him go, who got paid more, and then they signed Chidobe Awuzie, who's been, I considered him for my second team All-Pro. I really did. He's been awesome. So they did that. They did a good job to patch up the offensive line. It still needs to be worked on, but getting Riley Reif at right tackle was good. Quentin Spain held up at left guard. Thank you, John. William Jackson is who they let go. Bengals win front office of the year, in my opinion. A couple more Super Chat questions. Thank you, guys, for these great questions and for the support. We got some Canadian dollars coming my way. Thoughts on Kyle Pitts and the future of Atlanta? Trade Ridley, Matt Ryan's insane cap goes up in 2023. Atlanta's weird, man. They're in a weird spot. Kyle Pitts is just fine. And I was actually, I almost tweeted this earlier, but at what point do we stop blaming Matt Ryan's receivers for not freaking scoring touchdowns in the red zone? I've talked endlessly about how Matt Ryan is the biggest gap for any quarterback that I've ever watched between how good he is between the 20s and how good he is in the red zone. Matt Ryan is genuinely one of the worst red zone quarterbacks I have ever watched. He becomes a different person. Julio Jones historically didn't score touchdowns in that area, and now Kyle Pitts had 1,000 yards, but one mother effing touchdown. And I'm definitely not mad because I definitely didn't draft him in 3 fantasy leagues this year. But the dude doesn't move in the red zone. He doesn't have the arm to make tight window throws, and he doesn't have that anticipatory genius. He is actually freaking useless in the red zone. Red zone Matt Ryan is and always has been utter garbage. So don't blame Kyle Pitts because he only caught 1 touchdown. That's Matt Ryan's fault. That's why they should have drafted a quarterback this year. The Ridley situation's weird, man. It's really weird. I don't want to say anything insensitive because he's supposedly dealing with mental health issues and he wants out. So you want to be respectful of that, but that's really screwing Atlanta at the same time. I wouldn't want to trade him. They don't have any other options at wide receiver. It's a big part of why they felt comfortable moving on from Julio is they felt like they had Ridley. So as a guy that's always team first, I would want to work things out with Ridley. But it sounds like he might just want to change the scenery. It's a weird situation. I wouldn't want to move him, but they might have to. And then their quarterback, another reason they should have taken the quarterback is this class sucks at quarterback. Now, maybe you like a guy enough in the mid-first to take him and sit him behind Matt Ryan. Maybe Malik Willis is a good draft and develop type or something like that, but they're in a really tough spot at quarterback. Probably the hardest quarterback window with Matt Ryan and where they're at in the draft and how bad this class is. It's tough. It's really tough. And then from the Love Doctor, how important would you say hitting on first round picks is to how good a draft class is? I tend to feel as long as your first rounder isn't a bust, a good class after the first helps soften the blow. I don't know. I feel like every class is different. You just get as many good players as possible, I guess. It's obviously more impressive if you hit the later the rounds go on, but, if you're the Tampa Bay Bucks last year, you hit Tristan Wirfs in the first and Antoine Winfield in the second. Doesn't freaking matter who you take after that. It really didn't. But, just get as many great players as possible, and if you hit home runs in the late rounds, it's more impressive. But you can hit on the first couple rounds and be just fine whiffing on the rounds after that, as long as you really hit. All right, back to the Patreon mailbag. Do the Jags go, this is from Nicholas, do the Jags go after a recently fired coach like Nagy, Flores, or Zimmer? I wouldn't be surprised. I really wouldn't. Jags could go in so many different directions. I think that might not be a bad idea for them. Just to get the experienced, established guy. I probably wouldn't go Nagy. I don't hate Nagy, but you can do better than that, I think, with Trevor Lawrence in there. Zimmer could make some sense. Flores would definitely make sense. I could see that. I think Zimmer and Flores are like top 32 NFL head coaches. Especially if you want to like reset the culture, Flores would make a ton of sense. So definitely could see that. Or I could see them going a new young gun. All right, Tanner showing up in the Patreon questions too. If you're the Broncos GM, which of these three options would you do for a QB? Trade a lot of assets for an elite QB like Rodgers or Russell Wilson. Trade some assets for a good proven veteran like Matt Ryan. Or trade no assets and draft a QB like Kenny Pickett or Matt Corral. Broncos are also in a tough spot because I feel like they put all of their eggs in the Rodgers, Russ, Watson will be available next offseason basket. Doesn't look like Rodgers is going to be available, and we now know Russ is not available. Seahawks already said he wouldn't be, and I didn't think they would trade him anyway. So those two are probably off the table now. Watson, I've said, from a football perspective, yes. It's a different deal when you're saying this guy's going to be the face of our team, the face of our state, and he probably molested over 20 women. Usually I wish I was an NFL GM, but in this case, I'm glad I'm not the one that has to make that decision. Because that's an effed up morality question. So when it comes to Watson, I'm not saying yes or no on it. I totally get it from a football perspective. It would be the best case for the Broncos from a football perspective to get Deshaun Watson. Would I go trade for a Matt Ryan? If he was available, yeah, I would trade for Matt Ryan. I think the Broncos are a playoff team with Matt Ryan. Thin air would be a good thin air in Denver is a good spot for that noodle arm. And then the quarterbacks, like again, I haven't gotten into these quarterbacks yet. I'm hoping someone stands out to me. But they got to do something, right? So if they don't trade for Matt Ryan, I think you have to. I think you have to draft a guy. You have to make a decision on somebody. That said, it's a new. It's just tough, man. The Broncos could say, we'll hire a new coach. We're going to kind of rebuild this thing. We don't have expectations in year one. We understand this quarterback class isn't very good, and we'll wait another year and just go roll it back with Bridgewater and Locke, which I think would stink to do that, but there's a chance where they say, this isn't our year for a quarterback. I don't know. I think that's better than reaching on a guy. I do. Louis says Jordan Love trade would also be fascinating. I agree. Jordan Love to Denver would also pique my interest. That's another name that I always forget to bring up because I think he could be available for the right price in Green Bay. From Finn on Patreon. So as a player, I think Dean Lowry is one of the weirdest players, at least that I've paid attention to. He's great against average to below average guys, but when he comes to slightly above average to great talent, he disappears completely every time. Why do I think that is? I think it's because he's just an above average player. I think there's no reason to overthink that. He goes against good linemen. You know, he is a traits-based rusher. He's 6'6". He's got long arms. He's got decent power on the inside. But the second he goes up against a player that can stonewall that, there's really not a whole lot there's not a lot of other ways he can beat you. So I think it's pretty simple, honestly. I think he's a little bit matchup dependent as a power rusher, and he's just not a great player. He's fine. He's like an above average dude. From Ash, wanted to ask about the Lions and Dan Campbell. With it being confirmed that they've parted ways with Anthony Lynn, would you like to see Dan Campbell remain as the play caller or go out and find an OC to call plays? I could go either way on that. I could see, I could see a world where he develops as a really good offensive play caller. It's something that was the idea of that was kind of new this year. I don't think he did a notably bad job calling plays. Or I could see a world where it's smart to go find another young guy to develop in that spot. I could really go either way. I like Dan Campbell. I trust Dan Campbell. So whether it's him calling plays himself or him handpicking another play caller, I think both would be solid options. Sorry to take the cop-out route, but I think the Lions are in good hands from a staff perspective. I can't wait to see what they do this offseason now that they've had time to figure out who they are and where their true weaknesses are. I can't wait to see what that staff and Brad Holmes, who's a GM that I really like, I can't wait to see what they do this offseason because they could seriously skyrocket with some more talent because that's really their issue is talent. From Adam, more of an opinion, but do you believe the bye week for the 1 seed is truly a benefit? I think that it doesn't help. The week ends up hurting the team and throwing off the team's chemistry and rhythm. That's an opinion I've held for a long time. We've definitely seen it where teams with the bye week come out flat. I think it's why we saw Green Bay play their starters week 17 because they're or week 18 because they're we don't want to go 3 weeks without playing football. Muscle memory's got to get built back up. We've also seen one seeds come out fresh and beat up on teams. There's no proven science to it, but I do believe there are situations where it helps to just keep playing. Now, if you want to talk about full-scale probability, the probability, I'd still rather get the 1 seed because, it's one less game that you have to win. Let's be honest, luck is a big part of winning playoff games. It's one less game where the refs can change the result. It's one less game where you fumble a ball that you weren't expecting. It's just one less game that randomness can ruin your season. And it's one less game where you're risking injuries. So I still think on a macro scale, it's better to get the 1 seed. But there's a little bit of it where it's you're risking coming out slow as well. So I think you can go both ways on that one. Okay, from Jake, if you were the Colts, what would you do with Wentz this offseason? I think the Colts are stuck with Wentz for another year. Colts fans won't be happy about that. I could see them second, third round, maybe drafting a guy if one of these prospects starts to slip, just to kind of push Wentz a little bit. Kind of do the Jalen Hurts thing for him a little bit, but I think he'll be back. The way things ended, it left a sour taste in your mouth, obviously, and you're worried about that happening at any point in time. But I think still on the season as a whole, I still think that, on the range of outcomes of how bad Carson Wentz could have been this year based on what he looked like in Philadelphia the year before, he still was above expectations, I would say. But, you definitely don't like the timing of old Carson Wentz coming back out at the end of the year. So I think he's back in a prove-it year situation, and I wouldn't be surprised if they signed a Marcus Mariota or maybe trade for a Tua or draft a guy in the mid-rounds because they don't have a first, right? I wouldn't be surprised if they pick someone to push Wentz, but I think he's the week 1 starter next year because they don't really have an easy out. From Matt, how would you rank head coach and GM openings based on how enticing they are? This won't be perfect, but let me just write out what they are just so I can rank them. So we got New York Giants, Miami, we've got Jacksonville, we've got Bears, New York Giants, Raiders, and oh boy, who am I forgetting? Okay, well, let's just rank those 6 until someone in the chat can help out. But I would go, honestly, I think I would go Minnesota 1 because it's a blank slate. Like, no one's going to be mad if you move on from Kirk. You got a new GM in there, so, like, you got a blank slate. It's a great organization. You got Justin Jefferson. I think Vikings from a transitional and organizational perspective is very appealing to like someone that really takes a holistic look at it. I would then go probably Giants. I would go. I think I would go Bears because Fields. Bears because Fields, then Jacksonville because of Lawrence. Now the Bears have a better organization than the Jags do. That's why I'd put them over them. Broncos. Thank you, Broncos. That's who I'm forgetting, which is very attractive. Okay. Again, not going to be perfect, but I would go Minnesota. Bears, Jacksonville, and Denver are all pretty damn close for me. Las Vegas. Las Vegas, if you're trying to win right now, if you're willing to be more patient, I would go Giants. And then Miami's last for me. I mean, you just don't have a lot to work with there. It's just kind of an awkward window after they moved on from Flores. We do have some Super Chat questions. Man, this show is getting long. We are at 2 hours, still rolling. I might have to pocket some of these mailbag questions. I still got to work on studs and duds tonight. But what is the market for Love with Rodgers in his prime? 3rd and 4th is what I have right now. The thing is, the Packers wouldn't trade him for a 3rd and a 4th. Because Love hasn't been good enough where like he has any leverage to like force his way out. Like if Green Bay wants him to stick around for another 2 years, like Rodgers isn't like him and Rodgers are tight. Rodgers isn't like at this point Rodgers isn't mad that Love's there. As long as Rodgers keeps playing great, they're not going to do anything about it. At this point, the Packers can bite the bullet on it. Either way, like they can trade him or they can bite the bullet and just say like, you know what, we're gonna let him sit and develop and maybe he works out long term. But the Packers are not going to trade him for a 3rd or 4th. I think if you give a high 2nd, like if you're Carolina or if you're in the top 10 picks of the 2nd round, I think Green Bay would take it. Anything less than that, I really don't think they would. I think they would rather him just come back as the backup next year and play hardball. So I would say a top 50 pick for Jordan Love. And then from Dinesh, Kellen Mond and Zimmer appear to be a bad combo for the casual observer. Where do you see this going for Mond in the next year or two? I think they either trade Kirk and he starts next year just as like a total blow it up scenario, which is probably unlikely but possible, or he frankly maybe never plays in the NFL. I don't think he's very good based on what we heard about him from now. Granted, he was a rookie in camp, but everything I heard about him was he was horrendous in camp and practice. Like inaccurate throws, bad reads, like just did not look ready. And I think, as bitter as Zimmer can be sometimes, he wouldn't play, Sean Mannion if he didn't think he was genuinely better than Kellen Mond. I think there's a lot of red flags with Mond on the field. So honestly, I think he either starts as like a throw him to the wolves type of deal next year, just see what he can do in a tank season, or we maybe never see him, at least as a Viking. Maybe he gets retread as another backup somewhere else, eventually gets an opportunity, but it's not looking good for Kellen Mond's future outlook here. I think him looking as bad as he did internally may have played into the firing of Rick Spielman as well. Tanner, again, with the question on Super Chat. Super generous, Tanner. Thank you. Surprised no assistant coaches from Tennessee are being considered for head coach jobs. Not really, because I think Vrabel gets credit for that defense, and offensively they haven't really done jack diddly squat this year, so I'm not terribly surprised, no. All right, I'm going to try and get through these questions. It's been a heck of a mailbag, but I am fatiguing here. The voice is wearing down, so can't promise I get through all these. Well, this is from Nathan. This is another resting starters question, so I think, Nathan, we already kind of got to that already. He also asked, do I think the Bengals resting their guys will have any impact if they could come out hot? Yeah, I think the Bengals case, like the fact that Joe Burrow was beat up kind of made that decision easy. Rest him, get him healthy. Don't worry so much about coming out flat. From Snapshot, the Packers finally play in London. Would I attend the game? I mean, I would love to go to London. I love London. I would love to watch the Packers play. It's just a matter of logistics, right? Just got married, just bought a house. Finances are, not saying running out, but it's been a couple months, man. The thought of going to London for an NFL game isn't exactly on my radar at the moment, but yeah, I mean, I would love to go. That'd be super fun. I'm a big fan of the city of London. I studied abroad there in college, and I definitely want to take my wife there and show her around. And it wouldn't hurt to go to an NFL game in the process. From Tarver, how do you feel about nobody being afraid of the Chiefs? I said last week they barely beat bad teams, and now they almost lose to Drew Lock. Do I feel this game by Drew changed my stance on him? So there's a lot packed in there. No, my stance on Drew Lock hasn't changed. Maybe I wouldn't put him in the trash tier like I did. That might have been a little harsh, but he's a backup. He still can't read a defense. He's got traits, but at 26 years old or 25 years old in year 4, I'm not banking on him in any respect to develop those things until he comes out and proves it. I'm not giving him any opportunities that he doesn't fully earn, and I don't think he has yet. Played a little better than I expected, but again, Denver's got a great O-line and great receivers. He played solid. You should in that situation. I expect more based on the surrounding unit there in Denver. But no, my stance on Drew Lock hasn't changed, and I think people inside the league are still very much afraid of the Chiefs. Whether or not fans take them seriously or not, people are still going to get up for the Kansas City Chiefs and treat them like defending AFC champs because they know what those guys are capable of. So I'll just say that. From William on Patreon, who are the most overrated and underrated coaches in the league right now? Overrated, I'm still going to go Mike McCarthy because, let's be honest, both of their coordinators are being considered head coaches. Mike McCarthy, to me, has never been a great offensive mind. I don't think players take him that seriously. I think he's pretty fraudulent. So I would go Mike McCarthy as overrated. And underrated, Bill Belichick. The fact that he's not considered consensus best coach in the NFL right there makes him underrated. And Kyle Shanahan as well for underrated. I don't think I've heard Kyle Shanahan's name mentioned once for a coach of the year. I don't think he should win it, but he's done a great job this year. From Otter, do I see Dan Campbell being the guy for the Lions. Playoffs, division titles. I mean, if I'm a gambling man, no, it's the Detroit Lions. Like winning 4 games, or not even, what did they win, 3.5 games? They had a tie in like a fun underdog season is a lot different than consistently taking down the Bears, Vikings, and Packers. Like, historically speaking, those are very well-run organizations. If I'm a gambling man, I'm going to say no. I think there's probably a limit here, and it's just a revolving door for the Detroit Lions. I think he's the best coach they've had since Jim Caldwell. I think he's better than Matt Patricia. Do I know for sure that he's better than Jim Caldwell? No. Jim Caldwell had Matthew Stafford. Lions don't have a quarterback yet, so they have a long way to go. But he's doing a great job so far. From Ash, a lot of Lions questions. What should the Lions do about some impending free agents? Tracy Walker, Charles Harris, Josh Reynolds. Well, those 3 names, I like Tracy Walker. If he wants to come back for a reasonable deal, I would bring him back. You need 2 or 3 safeties in the modern NFL. He's versatile. I like him. With better talent around him, I think he could have a good second contract. Charles Harris seems to have found a home. I'd bring him back for 2 years, $15 million, if he's willing to take that deal. Josh Reynolds, whatever. If he wants to come back for free, that's fine, but you got to have bigger aspirations. You've got him on Ross St. Brown. I would let Reynolds go. I don't think there's anything really there. From Brandon, what do I think about the idea that either Frank Reich or Chris Ballard should be on the hot seat in Indy? I hate it. I absolutely hate it. Brandon, I know you're pointing this out because others are saying that. You disagree. I'm glad you pointed that out. Not trying to point you out. But yes, Colts fans, chill the F out. Your quarterback imploded in a season that you really had no business being as good as you were. Think back to where you were in August. Everyone was saying the Colts season's done because Quentin Nelson and Carson had like toe injuries, and then you said the season's done because you don't have enough talent to overcome that. Like, think about where you were in August and where you are now. That's good coaching. And yeah, Ballard is a great general manager. He's got his misses. He has occasional picks where I'm like, I guess I'll give Chris Ballard the benefit of the doubt on that one. Like the D lineman they took out of Vanderbilt in the second round. I was like, yeah, I had a 5th round grade on him. We'll see if he works out. But no, it's absurd. Frank Reich is a top 10 coach in the NFL. He's an elite culture guy. He's a great offensive mind. You've somehow been able to dodge for another year Matt Eberflus being in the head coach cycle because I don't think I've seen him get interviewed yet. It's just ridiculous. And, like, it's not all Carson's fault either. Like, the Colts don't have a great receiving core. They don't have, like, a great pass rush coverage combination, yet they have this great defense. Like, really, after all this time, after what you accomplished this year, now is your time to put them on the hot seat? No. Now, if next year, if they don't win 10 games, if they don't get the playoffs next year, then next year could be hot seat. Like, you got to have expectations next year, but they are a long way from being fired. From Tyler, this is our last question, unless we get any super chats here on the way out. Unbelievable support from you guys. These questions are amazing, so thank you. Okay. From Tyler, I understand this question is mostly determined by scheme and player skill set, but in a vacuum, what are your preferred player archetypes? So yeah, obviously scheme would play a huge factor in there, but let's just go by position. Quarterback, I wouldn't go archetype there. I mean, I want Aaron Rodgers as my quarterback. Can do everything. Running back, I guess I prefer I think I prefer the contact balance guy, the guy that you prefer breaking tackles over speed. Offensive archetypes are a little weird. Offensive archetypes are weird, but defense, I think you can point to some archetypes a little better. Just kind of a weird question without scheme, but and I don't love answering it, just like you said. But I guess D tackle, I'd rather have the power rusher, the Chris Jones type, as opposed to. I'm really uncomfortable watching this question or answering this question because scheme matters that much. So I really don't know if I can do this and do it justice, because I'd say I like Chris Jones over Cam Hayward, but I don't think either team would trade their guy for the other guy if their age was the same. So I'm sorry, Tyler, I can't bring myself to answer your question, because I guess just the way I view the game, it's so within scheme matters so much. So I'm really struggling to answer your question if you couldn't tell. But we did just get not a question, but thank you, Adam, for the super chat. We did just get one again from English. Thoughts on Leftwich turning up to his Jags Zoom interview in a teal suit, now favorite by the betting market. I don't hate it. I don't hate Byron Leftwich there. I just, if you could go Leftwich and attract like Mike Zimmer as your defensive coordinator or Vic Fangio as your defensive coordinator, it could make a little more sense. I think if anybody hires Byron Leftwich, I think it would be really good to have someone with that experience, because I think he's really young, and I would be worried, especially in like Jacksonville, where their culture is such a disaster, of that side of things. I don't have any issue with Leftwich as like a young offensive mind and taking that swing, but I think they would need to go with like a experienced counterpart. But yeah, it's better than I'd like that more than like Doug Peterson, I think, or Bill O'Brien. Connor Lee, what's up, Connor? Which teams other than the Vikings should consider blowing it up? Miami? If you couldn't tell, I hate the direction the Miami Dolphins are headed in. What's your plan here? You expect the defense to be better without Brian Flores? Okay, what's the plan there? He elevated like everybody on that defense with his scheme. And offensively, you want me to trust Tua and that offensive line to figure it out? Miami might be the most blow-it-up team. Saints, no. I don't think Saints, because Saints got excellent line play. They got great corners. Michael Thomas will be back. Saints just need to find a quarterback or bring Jameis back. I don't think the Saints should blow it up. Someone suggested that in the chat. Yeah, I mean, blow it up is a big move. You got to be in a special window to truly blow things up. So teams like more stuck in the middle, teams like the Raiders and the Steelers and I think the Broncos have too much talent on that roster to just hit the detonate button. You got to be in a pretty unique situation. You got to have an old roster, really no plan at coach, because typically you're going to end up firing the guy that blew it up. So Vikings are the best candidate for that. But I think that's going to do it. We had over $100 in Super Chat today, which I can't thank you guys enough. Your support of this channel, it's everything. It is just, that's all I can say. It is everything. This podcast, this show would not be alive without your amazing Super Chats, the Patreon support. So thank you guys so much. And thank you for listening to me literally ramble about football for 2 hours. I'm a lucky man. Got great following, amazing wife, decent dog. Shout out to Teddy. He's probably like, where's dad right now? Great family. So I'm very thankful. 2022 is off to a great start, and it's going to be even better moving forward. So seriously, thank you guys so much for watching. It was a great show. Feeling sentimental right now. Don't really know why, but hope you guys enjoyed the show. And we got studs and duds coming this weekend. Maybe just AFC this week, NFC next week. We'll see. TBD on that one.